Good evening, everybody. You are very welcome to 25th lecture of the special lecture series organized by the Department of Comparative Indian Language and Literature, University of Calcutta. And it is our pleasure that today we have a very special guest with us, Professor Prakash Patnaik from the Department of Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies, University of Delhi. Professor Prakash Patnaik absolutely does not need any introduction. He is very well-known professor and very, very renowned scholar in the field of indigenous literature, culture, and Indian literature in general. I would like to share some personal experience about how I was introduced to with Professor Prakash Patnaik. It is an incident of 12 years ago when after my masters I was looking for research degrees to pursue. I found Delhi University MIL and LS, but I didn't know how to collect the admission form, and suddenly I called Delhi University MIL office, and Professor Patnaik was the head of the department that time, and he told me just drop me your address and I will send you the application form. And I received the application form in my Kolkata hostel address within 7 days, and I was very, very overwhelmed, and I had very a great regard for him since that very day. And after that I came across many works of him, and gradually I personally came to meet him several times, and we shared our views and ideas about indigenous culture and Indian literature, about the discipline. And this department, our department at the University of Calcutta, is not at all new to him. He knows about this department from very beginning, and he is attached with it in different degrees, in different scales. We always get his help and cooperation. So, in that sense, from that perspective, also. I'm very grateful to him, and I welcome you all the audiences across the country who are present here to listen Professor Patnaik. And now I like to request our student Shonali Acharya to formally introduce Professor Patnaik. Then, sir, stage will be yours. You will deliver the lecture. Thank you.
Welcome all to the 25th lecture organized by Department of Comparative Indian Language and Literature, Calcutta University. Today our guest speaker will give us some insight on indigenous culture of India and enlighten us. Please welcome Professor Prakash Patnaik of MIL and LS Department of Delhi University. We can't cover his all achievement in this short intro. He did MA in Oriya and PhD on Huang tribe. He led several research projects. He has supervised many research scholars. He has significant number of papers on the areas he works. Besides teachings and research, Professor Patnaik worked across the country for different academic purposes. He has been working with the people of North Bengal and Northeast India more than a decade. And today we are so lucky to have him. He will share his views and experience on indigenous culture of India. Welcome, sir.
To look both Indian languages and literature in a comparative perspective, and they are doing good job, no doubt about it. When he contacted me, I thought, what should I tell? Then he gave me the liberty to speak whatever I think that is useful to the students. So I thought, why not? I request my students, my friends also to join this, so that we will have a larger gathering, and we all are at home during this pandemic period. And always, if there is any webinar, we think large number of participants join there. Now, formally, I will start, Dr. Pramanik. I'm really grateful you are giving me this opportunity. My dear students from Calcutta University and also from Delhi University, my friends whom I have personally invited to join, and also, very importantly, some of my lecture friends soon perhaps going to join if they remember, and all these learned listeners who are here sparing their evening schedule and they are attending this lecture. See, I have a presentation because I know you cannot look at the same person's face for 1 hour to listen the thing. So better to look at the presentation and not look at me. So I thought, presentation will not be boring. And just I have to see where did I keep it. Right, I think I'll get it. Yes.
One copy.
Just wait. We say. Now it is said. So this is the topic that I have given: indigenous culture of India and construction of culture in India. I discuss, number of times on this, and my students are aware of my area on which I work, and I have been engaged in working. So the topic itself is telling something, but I don't have to speak on the topic now. What are the key points I'm going to discuss? I'm going to discuss about the indigenous culture. I'm also talking about the culture mixing. And the third, there is a proposal and how to construct a culture area. When I talk about construction of a culture area, please accept it as a model and try to see that whether this model will be applicable to other parts of the country or not. So far, the indigenous culture is concerned. And if it is so, then my question is, why are we always trying to bring Western theory and trying to apply in our soil? Why not we collect material from our soil and start constructing a theory of our own? So keeping this in mind, I am just showing a model because students, everybody is a student, even teachers are also students who are working in this particular field or thinking to work in this particular field will try to explore whether that is possible or not. And in the beginning, let me tell you, I have used the word indigenous deliberately in place of tribe. Somehow, I don't like to use the word tribe. And we all know tribe, indigenous, aboriginal, all these terms have been used or have been in use for long in a kind of senses which is not, easily acceptable. We can say in a pejorative sense. But when we start analyze each of the terms, what was the need of so many terms, we understand that these terms normally exhibit pejorative sense, but each one of them serve specific purpose in a specific socio-political situation. So that is the reason I prefer indigenous over tribe. Then second point of this selection is, we know there was a period that was we can call old tribal period. Because tribe as a term was not in use before 19th century. It was in mid 19th century, or maybe it is in the early 19th century in English literature, somewhere the expressions of Scottish tribe, Irish tribe came into use. Prior to that, it doesn't mean that the people were not there. People were there, but the term was not in use. And then how the term tribes, the use of the term tribes, it refers to a group, and there is no doubt about it. It refers to a group or the groups working under one group, but having distinct culture of their own. So a group with a distinct culture is tribe for everybody, and hereafter I'm not going to use the word tribe, I'm going to use the word indigenous, because the word only serves some kind of administrative or political purpose, and in academic world it is better to avoid. So when I look at the tribes, my priority is to see the tribes or tribal life in three ways. One is historical. And when we talk about historical, we see and the origin of the group. The group is how the group is referred. One group is referred as the original or earliest settlers of that region and have been inhabiting in that region for long, though they have come in contact with different groups and their cultures for a long, yet maintaining a culture of their own. So that is the historical way of looking a community, a group, the indigenous group. The second point that is made here is relational. When we talk about the relation, we try to establish the relationship, and in our conversation, we always mention the indigenous community as they, and the speaker, even if it is me, as we. So that is the relational sense. We have been, it is in our mind to think that, okay, there is a clear-cut distinction, we and they, and there is a gap, even if there is no geographical gap or physical gap, we say that there is a gap, and therefore we is different from they. But the third point is very, very important. Even if we live in the same geographic setup, the cultural, ecological matters are more important in leading in the life of a community and also in maintaining a community life within the community. And it is true that the group is controlled by surroundings, the people, their food habits, their lifestyle, their social organizations, their beliefs, their customs, their rituals, practices, everything is controlled by the surroundings. And the surroundings play a major role. The mountains, rivers, forest, and the people living in the surroundings. So not only one group, the other groups living in the surroundings, they play a major role. The natural and socio-cultural influences on a particular group do not affect much to the knowledge system, but in the community life, we experience changes, and that is how one group becomes different from the other groups. But in totality, if we see the indigenous culture or cultures, then the cultural and ecological surroundings play major role in their life. We understand when we talk about culture, we understand that there are two sets. One is the tangible, whatever we see, the forest, mountain, rivers, all these things come under that. And another is intangible, that goes with the personal life of the community people. But both are responsible. The intangible cultural heritage or culture has a major role to retain the community life than the tangible aspect. But it doesn't mean that the tangible part can be ignored by the people living in that surroundings. And that is the reason we find there are many protests, and that is going on since my data today. I am actually taking Sikkim as an example. So I'll say how many things are going on, in Sikkim when there are many hydro projects that are coming off on the river Tista. So because people are not ready to accept that the cultural, my tangible cultural heritage of our region gets disturbed. And intangible, again, the insiders, the community people are responsible in maintaining the intangible cultural heritage. So that is intangible cultural heritage. And that they do wherever there is a community, wherever the community is conscious about maintaining community life, they try to keep their intangible cultural heritage intact in order to keep the entity of the community. Next point is definitional issue. Neither culture nor the cultural diversity can be defined in a line. I always say I am away from this definition because no definition to me is complete. No one can define in one line, one paragraph what culture is. And if we define, the day we become successful in defining the culture, and the same day we are actually losing something called culture. And that is true to any society, but my concentration here is on the indigenous culture. And cultural diversity, different cultures operating within one geographic setup. It may be a village, it may be a district, a region, or a state or country. There are different cultures operating simultaneously. People carrying different cultural elements live in a particular geographic setup, therefore there is cultural diversity. But when it comes to multiculturalism, if we try to check Google, they say it is a synonym of cultural diversity, which is not true to me, because multiculturalism goes with the people which exposed to number of cultures simultaneously. Whereas cultural diversity remain in a particular geographic setup. There are different cultures operational in a particular setup. And when they are exposed, people exposed to different cultures in a particular setup, then comes the multiculturalism. And how this is important, the way biodiversity is important to retain the human life, the entity. Similarly, cultural diversity is responsible to maintain humanity. And the third point I always refer, that is cultural pluralism, because this is what my country has taught me. We accept cultural diversity as the beauty. We are exposed to multiculturalism, different cultures simultaneously, and we know how to respect others' culture. And that happens even in small patch, small areas where indigenous community people inhabit for long. one culture respects the other culture. And therefore, we have number of cultures we find in a particular geographic setup. One is not dominated by the others unless there is a particular purpose behind that. So the socio-cultural composition of the community is again maintain cultural diversity, the people are exposed to multiculturalism. They know how to respect the diversity, and they also know how to retain cultural pluralism in a situation the country that provides. And all these things, all elements of culture, be it a single culture, cultures exposed to multiculturalism or exposed to modernism, exposed to acculturation, modernization, all the changes, they are responsible in bringing changes to the cultural life of the people, but they have not killed the mindset of the people to accept cultural elements to retain the cultural life and community life. So always there are social system or systems, and that helps in maintaining community life. So there are attempts to safeguard worldwide tangible cultural heritage. We know, and we are conscious about that. We know the population, the Lepcha population in North Jangu, they are interested in keeping or making it the cultural heritage of the Jangu community, the Lepcha community, Lepcha cultural heritage, and that kind of recognition they have already been, gotten from the government. Government has accepted that. So it is not easy to go there and stay without permission of the community head. But there are also attempts to maintain and retain and protect the intangible cultural heritage. So what happened in the intangible cultural heritage that is transmitted from generation to generation is constantly created by communities and groups in response to their environment. Their interaction with nature and their history gives them a sense of identity and continuity, thus promoting respect for cultural diversity and human creativity. This was the ILO resolution of 20th June 2007. And as a result, there is a conscious attempt to protect the interest of cultural minorities. And this is worldwide. And even if it doesn't come as a rule, as a law, we are ready to accept because we believe in cultural pluralism. And that's what exactly my country has taught me. And it has also taught others who are the carrier of the culture of the community. Then we always conscious to promote the cultural diversity, because while if I am interested in the promotion, preservation, conservation, and promotion of my culture, my cultural elements of my culture, and another person is doing the same thing, this is the way people from different groups and subgroups, they try to promote or they help in the promotion of cultural diversity. And cultural diversity also gives space for human creativity. It also helps in the protection and social vision of culture. Because culture retains everything. We cannot ignore culture. Whatever development that takes place in the society and the community, even if the community gets benefit from those developments, but still we are controlled by the culture. And when it comes to indigenous community, they're totally controlled by the culture. Because culture is controlled by the surroundings. Culture is controlled by the ecology. So any kind of commodification that is done by the outsider is not easily acceptable by the community. And therefore, we talk about the culture, right? So the whole thing has been presented in this chart. You see, who carries the culture? It is the people. Otherwise, culture, if there are no people in the land, cannot talk about the culture. Only people talk about the culture, the other's culture. Maybe animal behavior can be called or treated as a culture, but if the people only carry the culture. And people live in a particular geographic setup. Therefore, the geography is important, where they live. People, where they live. And in the geography, not only the people live, there are other animals also live. There are flora, fauna, forest, mountains, rivers, and many other objects we find in the environment. And all contribute to the life of the people. Therefore, all play major roles in the life of the people. And this is how the culture is flourished. And when we come to the now left side of the chart, you see that the culture, and that helps in maintaining the community life. If cultural elements are kept intact, cultural elements are shown as the treasure of the community, then the community life remains intact and community lives become visible before others. It may not be visible. I belong to a community. It may not be visible to me, but it is visible to others. And from the distance, the outsiders say, this is the community life. This is the culture of that community. And what do we do? There are many things that comes under the basic needs. But while looking at the culture, we cannot ignore to discuss the basic needs. Because all these things are again contributing to build a culture. For example, the food habit of a community depends upon the geographic situation where they live. Depends upon the availability of the food item, whether it is forest products or the food that is collected from the sea sources. So it depends upon that. So in our day-to-day life, we collect items from the environment, from the geography, and at the same time, we try to link with the culture what is acceptable, what is not acceptable to us. We have different taboos. We are not supposed to touch this particular tree. We are not supposed to touch mango before it is offered to the god or goddess. We are not supposed to eat rice unless it is offered. So these things creating a link with the culture, the environment, geography, and culture, and who retains it, who observes it, who accepts it without any objection to this kind of belief is the community. Therefore, we maintain a community life. So culture is expressed in two ways. One is through expressions where we use our skill or the oral cavity. And when it comes to oral cavity, we talk about folk literature, but I personally prefer the term oral tradition in place of folk literature. I don't have to discuss that. We all know song, tale, myths, legends, all types of utterances come under that. But what is important, and all the communities have, because they have the proud feeling that to tell others that we, the people of that community, are the first inhabitants of this land. So therefore, we have our story to tell, we have our song to sing, and myths to believe, and we have our utterances that provide space for entertainment or to interact with others. So each community has a distinct art form, and those art comes as the identity marker of the community. And sometimes art is converted to craft, And in craft, we find both art and how the craft is useful. So all these things in culture, particularly indigenous culture, come through expressions. And when it comes to practices, we have different practices: social practices, religious practices, and number of practices are observed in the day-to-day life. Under social practices, different types of performances come. You can say theater, play, games, but theater is not the right form to use when it comes to indigenous culture. But in order to find another equivalent, or still we get another equivalent to the term, let us use that. Then music, song, all these come under performances. So you will find the distinct performative traditions are available among different communities. And the games, local games, and particularly when we are talking about the tribes of Odisha, tribes of West Bengal, or the Northeast region, we find there are various traditional games, perhaps which are only in the community, and they follow the same practices, same norms, same beliefs, and same procedure what the modern game has. Then comes the religious. We worship the objects, we worship the ancestors, and our belief system accommodates all the kinds of practices linked with the religious sentiment of the people. And when I talk about the religious sentiment of the people, I'm not talking about the institutionalized religions which are forced on them, or they have accepted for some reason or other. And this religious temperament that accommodates various rituals and that talks about different rituals also followed with some kind of festivals, and that is how we get festivals. Initially, the festivals for the purpose of religious purpose, but later it comes for amusement, for entertainment. So we find number of festivals. The traditional festivals are still there, and most of them are linked with the agriculture. And therefore, after the harvest is over, we find more festivals. Under the performances, again, it is interesting to see the indigenous festivals, in the performances of indigenous communities. What do they do? There we find that each one of the community members is a performer. The person listens, the person joins in the dance, leaves the arena, dancing arena, goes, take rest, and comes back again and join in the performance. The reason is the indigenous community doesn't require any outsider to watch the performance. They are the performer and they are the spectators or the audience. And in day-to-day life, you see the medicines. In 2006 and 2007, I spent few days with the Karbis of Assam. And we went to a remote Karbi village of Amran Subdivision. When I was just going to people and talking to people, sitting with them, visiting different houses, I noticed that I'm talking about 2006, 2007, except salt and oil, they do not buy anything. I think perhaps changed by now, but it is not that fast. So except oil and salt, they don't buy anything. They weave, they make their dresses, they wear. They collect all types of foods, both veg and non-veg, they get from the kitchen garden or the paddy field they have. And they have their practice of medicines that we find in all communities. The knowledge is there. The knowledge of medicines, how to use it, in what condition it should be used, and how to get relief out of it. So there is a perfect healing system. It's operational in almost all the indigenous communities. And there are other things also: how to make a basket, how to make a fishing instrument, how to make a musical instrument. And it is not that musical instrument. The moment I say musical instrument of the community X, it doesn't simply refer to a musical instrument. It starts with a myth when the first musical instrument came to the community. They start with a myth, and then comes what are the festivals associated with the that particular musical instrument. Which type of, the type of food will be used to welcome people and to say goodbye people. So these are all many things like that. And those things, or the preparation of those things, making of those things, go with the belief their day-to-day life need, their belief, and the knowledge of the few individuals who pass the traditional knowledge to others in course of time. So this is not a very big picture of the whole thing, just to understand what the indigenous community life is, indigenous culture is, indigenous life is, indigenous community life is. And each one of these in the chart, each one item requires a thorough discussion. But our practitioners are talking about, particularly the folklorists who are discussing on folk items, they are more interested in the left-hand side materials, that in folk literature or oral tradition. Now, my examples, because most of my friends know I am largely associated, I'm lately associated with these groups. Even Dr. Pramanik also knows, he has translated the short story from the lecture community. So they in India, they are the inhabitants of Sikkim and Darjeeling. So the area that I have chosen for the demonstration is Sikkim and Darjeeling district of West Bengal. Now, of course, Kalimpong is another district, so you can add that. So Darjeeling and Kalimpong district of West Bengal. So Lepcha considered as the first inhabitants of Sikkim, and Jammu is the place. They are considered as the first inhabitants in that area. Prior to them, no one had gone to Sikkim. And whether history supports this argument or not, that is not our concern, because in culture, what people believe is more important than what history says. And the oral historians, they collect materials from the oral tradition. That means indirectly they're collecting information from the culture. Then came the Bhutias, migrated from Bhutan between 15th and 16th century. One is considered as the original inhabitants, first inhabitants. The other group migrated from Bhutan in 15th, 16th century, and then came the Nepalis, who migrated after the Bhutia. And there are others, there is a long list of others. So I am taking only 3 major groups for the demonstration here. Some of these groups have their subgroups also. They speak variety of languages. If we minutely observe the linguistic peculiarities of the languages, we can put them under one family. And they also, though they share, and some of them shares the language, but they have unique system, well-knit socio-cultural system, strong kinship bonds, stable organizations, and fairly high levels of performing traditions. And one traditions, the performing tradition, one group is different from the others. From outside, if we see, maybe all performances look same, but when we minutely observe the performances going on by different communities, we find there are differences. And if I put these 3 groups, the Lepcha, Bhutia, and Nepalis, The linguistic division, Bhuj, Lepcha and Bhutia, the language come under Tibeto-Burman language family, whereas Nepali is the Indo-Aryan language family. And in economic sphere, they are interdependent to one another because they use the same geographic space, the same land, so they are interdependent to one another. One learns the skill, one learns the traditional knowledge from the other, and it is revealed through their economic pursuits determined by natural, social, and cultural environment. They have also their traditional and political system which guide and control the community. And that is our attempt now to retain that, particularly the lecture and Bhutia, how the political system of one community remains intact and start guiding and controlling the community. All associations have their own rules and regulations, and there is another development now all over in the Northeast and also even in Odisha, the tribal communities, we are talking about customary law. But prior to that, it was never a written document. Now it has come out as a written document. In every aspect of their life, there is interference. And who are interfering? It is the outsiders. And who are the outsiders? It is one group become the outsiders to other group. You know, I told in the beginning that when we try to look into this community in a relational sense, the we and they distinction comes, and that is prominent in case of interference. The sense of identity and cultural self defines their degree of ethnic solidarity, but proudly people say that yes, we the Lepchas, we the Bhutias. This solidarity, ethnic solidarity is there, and some are, of course, you know, they're staying in urban areas, and definitely because of their they are shifting to urban areas, they exhibit some kind of changes among their counterparts who live in the remote villages. But what they retain in this land is the cultural diversity. And some of them are exposed to multiculturalism. That is the discussion I made in the beginning. You see, in Darjeeling, if we go there, we find that Nepali language was the lingua franca. And it is very difficult. If we watch the cultural behavior, it is not that easy for an outsider to distinguish the cultural behavior of the Lepchas from Bhutias and also the Nepalis. So this happens, and the other groups like Limbu, Rai, Magar, Guru, Kumang, I'm not going to discuss, but because they don't display very distinct cultural traits, but they argue they are different. They are not subgroup of any communities. And that has happened in Nagaland and Manipur. We have number of Nagas, but we cannot say there is only one Naga and they are the subgroup of Nagas. Each subgroup is a group now, and they try to retain and show their identity. And that is the beauty of the community life, community system, and the social system of the community. But what they are contributing in these two areas, Sikkim and Darjeeling, is they are contributing to the cultural diversity. And to me, I always tell my students will say that diversity is beauty. So far, the indigenous culture is concerned. Diversity is not a problem to us. Then the people living in that region, particularly Gangtok or Darjeeling in the city, they are exposed to multiculturalism. Though they use Nepali, because that is the lingua franca of the area. Then how important the groups are, and what do they claim? We find in each group are having myths, this origin stories of their origin or migration, and they claim each group They are the first human race in the universe. Interestingly, this is not in Darjeeling and Sikkim only. You go to any part where we have indigenous communities in south, in north, in eastern India, northeast India. Each community will argue that in our myth it is written that we are the first human race in the universe. The land we have been living was first made for us, not for others. Others came only after us. And therefore, whatever visible to us is only meant for us. That's the argument of the community people. And this space has given by the community life. Community life has kept this feeling intact, and oral tradition is propagating this idea that we are the first human race, the land belongs to us, whatever available in this land, even visible in the sense I said, the people of Darjeeling and Sikkim, they see Kanchenjunga, the Mount Everest, and they say it is ours because Kanchenjunga is our God. They are using the water of Tista, and they say Tista is meant for us originally. Others are encroaching. So this type of feelings you will find everywhere, because each group has its own language, and in the language, the group identity, the language of that group says, the language means the man. So it is Lepcha means man, Bhutia means man, Santali means man, Khasi means man, so man refers to man. So we are the first human race. But what has happened? That they had been inhabiting for long. Let us go back to the Sikkim or Darjeeling situation. Bhutias was living, Nepalis are living. Who came first, who came later, that is a different thing. Already I have discussed, this is what they say, they believe. But at one point, after the shifting cultivation was stopped and they moved to settled cultivation, they settled in a particular land, and therefore they came in contact with each other. They came in contact with each other. And while coming in contact with each other, they tried to start borrowing from each other. And what is that borrowing? The borrowing is nothing but the knowledge or indigenous lore. And lore has come from the culture. So when three groups settle at a particular geographical space, the question comes whether they have one culture and many cultures. We know many cultures. These are an example of three. This can be 5, this can be 10 also. There is a high-low hegemony because each group claims that we are from the higher culture, our culture is high, the other culture is low. But what is important to me in my community is my community culture. And when I accept it is high or low, then definitely one group, one culture, one cultural elements dominate the other cultural elements. And therefore, the constant encounter goes. All of them try to exhibit dynamic dimensions of their culture, reflected in the social, economic, political, religious, ritualistic, ecological, and technological matters. And the feeling of we and they becomes stronger. Each group tries to identify itself as the original inhabitant and others as outsiders. But irrespective of this dichotomy, high, low, we, they, at issue, when they come in contact, they borrow from each other, and what they borrow is the knowledge, the indigenous knowledge. That is also referred as load of one group when situation arises. When the time comes, one group borrows the indigenous knowledge from another group and apply it to get a positive result. As a result, we explore a common culture. And this diagram clearly says, I have given culture 1, culture 2, culture 3. This is not to grade the cultures. Any culture can be kept anywhere. And the borrowing area is the proposed culture area in this deliberation. And hence the common knowledge shared by different groups contribute to the idea of the construction of culture area. Then there is always, people are in dilemma whether to accept or reject others' knowledge. But when the situation comes, they are left with no choice, they have to accept it. Intercultural adoption is possible within many groups or subgroups in Sikkim. There is constant encounter between culture and cultures because of the diversities. But the essential core remains the same. And at one point, it becomes difficult to find out that the knowledge belongs to whom, which culture. And that is the proposed culture area. But the idea, the way there are cultural borrowings, there are also linguistic borrowings. Therefore, we find, many vocabularies that has come from one language to the other. So where from, I have also borrowed something, I want to admit, and the host department that has arranged this lecture, they are working on the comparative language and comparative literature. And when we talk of comparative language study, in India and Indian languages, in a comparative perspective, if we aim to do that, we have to refer to Immuno's paper, India as a Linguistic Area, first published in 1956. And in 1972, he came with another paper revisiting India as a linguistic area. And in the last page and last paragraph in the footnotes, he has explained what linguistic area meant to him. Immuno's construction was the outcome of the assessment of the common features in languages spoken in different groups in India belonging to different language families. There are different languages. They come under different language families, but there are commonalities among the languages. And his observation is divided. The construction of culture area is based on this one geographic area, but the spoken languages are different. You say, there are many languages, and India is a multilingual and country because we are exposed to multilingual situation. We also talk about linguistic diversity the way I'm referring to cultural diversity. That means many languages spoken in one geographic area simultaneously. Sometimes the languages belong to different language family, and here is an example. You have Bhutia and Lepcha coming from Tibeto-Burman language family, whereas Nepali from Indo-Aryan language family. Common elements in languages which cannot be considered as the property of a particular linguistic group. This is Immuno's observation. You will find the same elements are available in different languages coming under different language families. Hence, no particular element can be claimed as the property of a particular linguistic group or linguistic community or a language family. And what happens when they come in contact with each other, there are constant borrowings among linguistic groups, the language groups. One group borrows from the other, and simultaneously the other group also borrows some elements from the other group. And by citing lots of examples in that paper, he concluded that this can be extended to get a larger linguistic area. So I tried to apply that and see what is the situation. The same situation here. The habitation. one geographic area and many communities they habit. They inhabit in a same geographic setup, and they are from different linguistic groups. Here you have two, but there are places we have 3, 4 like that. And you see, this cultivation another mode. All of them were living in the hills, and so earlier arrangement was shifting cultivation, and now that is stopped. Now they have gone to permanent or settled cultivation. But settled cultivation, there is another form of cultivation that is called terrace cultivation. And if you accept, I think there is no point in not accepting that the knowledge of terrace cultivation that the Bhutias and Lectures have got, definitely it has come from the Nepalese. So adaptation, that is a process that has come because of the joint habitation, and the rate of adaptation is more, thus giving rise to some common practices. If the rate of adaptation is more, it gives rise to common practices. There are attempts to upgradations, then upgradation is also accepted by all the communities, and that therefore it becomes the properties of all the communities. We know the culture changes, and that the changes are evident anywhere. New things will be accommodated, old things will go, but the knowledge and the knowledge that has contributed to the knowledge system of that region remains the same. Even if people going out of that land also try to apply the same knowledge there. The knowledge of medicine I had in my childhood days, sometimes when I get a chance and I don't have any other things to do to get immediate cure, I apply that knowledge. This is human tendency. So we don't forget the law. Only thing is there is no channel for transmission. But in indigenous communities, the channels are open. But what happened after doing that? Do they lose their identity? No, their identity is intact. The group knowledge or lore passes from one group to another and one generation to another. So the knowledge transfers, the acceptability of the knowledge also transfers. One group comes frequently contact with another group. The borrowing increases, and the cultural elements that is important to one community no longer remains important to that community. Even if that remains important to that community, the others also get a share of that. So social sanctions by different groups and culture, including, so we have to accept, because we are the community man, and to lead a community life, the people of indigenous communities, they accept the norms that has been imposed or that it's been shown by the community. And so this is how they see this picture. Irrespective of mixing, now we are leaving the middle portion, that is the proposed culture area, and what remains is the individual community identity or entity. Therefore, we call Nepali culture, we say Lepcha culture, we say Bhutia culture. And in the end, of course, I will try to add the way Imuno said that there is a possibility to extend it. I have seen almost the same situation in Meghalaya. My friend, Professor Pradhani is there, will say that it is possible to work extensively to find out the commonalities and whether there is a possibility of constructing a culture area or not. My friends from Odisha, they will say whether that is possible to construct this area in the tribal communities or indigenous communities of Odisha or not. Similarly, in other areas, Assam, of course, we know it is possible, and sometimes it is difficult to differentiate. But within that closeness, we will find a distinct marker of identity that is there among the communities. So each group has distinct knowledge system irrespective of influences. All the groups are governed by their customary laws, their social values, ethos, customs, norms, and belief system. Certain things are common, but the rest are specific to that community. The set of rules through which the society is governed are transmitted from generation to generation. We are saying no, things are dying, which is not correct. The reason is we try to collect our information, collect our data from secondary sources. If we go to field, start living with the community and watch what is going on in the community, we'll find most of the things are, intact. Migration is responsible for creating subgroups that you know it, but within the groups, but each group doesn't rise as a distinct indigenous or cultural group. What has happened in some communities because of the migration, and it is the minimum migration in the sense they have changed the place in the forest and they have gone to another forest. Later, maybe outsiders say that it is a subgroup of the original group, but it is a distinct indigenous cultural group, very well, because they cannot establish their identity separately. And irrespective of changes take place in the process of acculturation and modernization, the use of indigenous knowledge in the society as well as neighboring society is clearly established. The scientific developments which are evident in the modern society has no important role in the indigenous knowledge. Hence, without any special attention given by anybody on the preservation of indigenous knowledge, it remains with the group and provides an identity unique in itself and broader identity outside the community. So, considering all those things, my proposal is to think of a cultural area. This is a model to study the cultures of different communities and their common elements that the students of comparative literature and language are expected to do. Why did I add literature here? When we talk about language and culture, literature has no place without language and culture. So we need both. So if it has been experimented in language and in culture, we are talking about the cultural area, we can also think about literature area. And that, of course, these two departments, my department of Modern Indian Language and Literary Study. Now we have another Modern Indian Language and Literary Study department in Guwahati University, and our friend Dr. Pramanik is heading the Department of Modern Indian Language and Comparative Language and Literature department in Calcutta University. We are working on this. So my appeal to the students who are sitting here, not to confine their observation. They should not confine their observation to literature only, and finding similarities and dissimilarities among Indian literature and other aspects of comparative literature. They also should try to focus on language and culture simultaneously. With this, thank you. My time allotted was 1 hour and it is perfectly 1 hour. So I stop here, and I will appreciate if I get some questions on my presentation.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was such an illuminating lecture, and it is indeed a proposal, a message, and it will definitely guide us to find new direction in our research and studying Indian literature. Sir, we have quite a few questions, so we'll put forward those questions to you for further discussion. And one thing today I must mention that many distinguished professors and scholars across the country are present here. So it is truly a multilingual platform today. So I would also like to request all the scholars and distinguished professors present here to engage with the discussion. then we will we'll get more enriching discussion session. So meanwhile, we have few questions. Let me begin with those questions.
Yes, please carry on.
Yeah.
I am still on the slide. The reason is if anyone wants to go back, I can go back.
Yeah, sure. First question is by I think Professor Raja Pradhani, and he said that it is very well argued talk on a significant topic. Would the term indigenous in place of tribe be problematic in a multi-ethnic society where there are indigenous communities but all of them are not recognized as tribe? Is there any possibility that a larger applicability of the term might eventually marginalize the small tribes against larger communities who would also claim to be indigenous?
Yeah, that is my argument is precisely that instead of putting a particular community under the term tribe, if we say indigenous communities, it will perhaps it will create more space to accommodate more community people. And I don't find any such problem. But when you are Dr. Pradhani, you are visualizing this thing, and let me tell Professor Pradhani has spent many years in Northeast area. And perhaps he has more information on that. He knows what are the situations, what are the problems. But I don't see any kind of problem actually in accepting indigenous. Because I told you that before 19th century, there was no term that is referred as tribe. That if that was not there, why should we talk now? And we know what the purpose of making creating a term tribe, and then came scheduled tribe, all those things were in the purpose. But if we can say that indigenous is a better term and it is accepted worldwide, then I don't find that there will be any problem. But more than that, let the community be identified with the name of that community than indigenous. If I say Lepcha, it should be Lepcha. There is no need to put it Lepcha communities. But surprisingly, there is one association, Indigenous Lepcha Tribal Association. So they have used both. And this I had a discussion, I said, why not Lepcha Association? Otherwise, what is happening, if we use tribe, it has become a blanket term now, and everything put under that. We are talking about tribal language. There is not a single language which is called tribal language. We are talking about tribal culture. So the independent identity or entity of that particular culture, of the community culture, is reduced to, or it is covered within a broader term that is tribal culture that doesn't exist. So therefore, and people are saying tribal dance, tribal music, tribal language, but no music is tribal music. That is, suppose the Santali music, we can say Khasi dance, we can say Naga dance, but not when the moment we say tribal dance, of course, that is overshadowed by a different term. So therefore, my suggestion is, okay, let it be either indigenous or let it be referred with the name of the community. So this is what I propose, Professor Pradhani.
Okay, sir. The next question is by Professor Namrata Chaturvedi. Very well argued and presented. Kindly allow me to ask a question regarding the first point that you made about Western literary theories and the need for cultivating and nurturing an indigenous theoretical paradigm. Can you take us through the kind of work that has come up in indigenous theorization so far in India?
No, the thing is, who should we expect to do all those things? What we have been doing, we have been applying Western theories borrowed from the West, without actually verifying whether they had access to the original documents from our land or not, original materials they are collected from our land or not. Maybe that particular theory is applicable, that and no theory can be universal. That also we have to think about it. That may be universal now. When you refer to indigenous communities, no theory can be universal because the community is controlled, the community culture is controlled with the surroundings. What I said, the socio-cultural and ecological surroundings. When that is that, we cannot make the theory, universal. That is the problem. Therefore, our approach is different from the approaches of social anthropologists. In course of discussion, I tell the moment I discuss with my students about the bride price, they feel bad about it. But you come to Orissa, the tribal community, it is a prestige. Prestige that the bridegroom or his family are going to pay in some kind or money or in some way or other to get a bride from that family. And this is not a derogatory thing because the woman is considered as the economic asset of the family. When that goes to another family, the family has to give compensation. So the word bride price controlled the peculiarity of a culture. It controls the speciality of a culture that gives much higher position to the women folk in the society. Similarly, another is rice beer. We have different names, made out of rice is not rice beer because these are the colonial anthropologists, they have used for their purpose. But as a scholar from India and you are exposed to an indigenous community, you collect your own data. You try to establish a theory and let others do that. The attempts are being done. Many scholars are working. Definitely, I can name many scholars who have been working. Only thing is whether we accept it as a theory or the utilization of the material in a different manner. The way I am proposing, I am not claiming this is a theory. I am proposing this is a model. To understand the community in relation to another community that is living, inhabiting in that particular area. So definitely, madam, I will try to provide some information. I will pass it to Dr. Pramani and he will pass it to you.
Sure, sir. The next question is by Arup. Arup wants to know that high society have been dominating other societies since long. For example, two Santal boys from my village have been living in city for their academic purposes around their childhood and they are habituated with Bengali culture and language, but unfortunately they don't know their own language properly. Second, people of Santali community of my village don't follow their all festivals since long. So how do they hold their own culture?
We know the culture will be retained if there is proper conservation of that. And we are confusing. We are always talking about preserving culture. Outsiders cannot preserve the culture of the community. It is the community only responsible to preserve. And how to preserve when they will make it huge. Just like the language, if we don't use the language will die. If we don't follow, the culture will die. But the example you have given may not be always correct. Maybe two boys, they are staying outside and the moment they come back, how do they identify themselves? Are the community man or an outsiders? If they behave as if they are outsiders to their community, that is their personal problem. But there are people also who respect the culture. I will give one example because those who know Santali communities of India, they know about one gentleman, a doctor, Dhuni Soren, who is in Liverpool for past 50 years. And it is interesting that his two daughters got married, one in Australia and another in another country. But the marriage took place in Dumka. He came to Dumka to conduct the marriage following Santali customs. and I was also invited, but I could not go there. So there are people who are also who have real love, and he's a doctor in profession, the medical practitioner, doctor in profession. He and his wife came with the daughters and the son-in-laws from other communities, even other countries, and they performed the marriage in Dumka following all Santali rites. So this is the matter of choice, because culture is not individual. Culture goes with the community. If one or two boys do different things, they have migrated for something or other, they don't come back, we don't expect the cultural life in them. So I am referring to the community life. Therefore, I am referring to the community life. And if the community life is not there, the culture will be affected easily. The culture will not be there. So maybe wrong examples, but yes, festivals are followed. Now, I know in Santiniketan area, there is Santali Basti, we find they follow all festivals. And the Pushpar, the famous Pushpar, very much in the news nowadays, that is followed by the Santalis, that is observed by the Santalis. And that has gone to other cultures. The people of other cultures, they accept that. And it is no longer a Santali festival. So this is the way culture also spreads. So we cannot say that they are not doing. Only thing is, in all the communities, maybe there is a trend, a declining trend, but we cannot say that the culture is totally absent. Otherwise, we cannot live a community life. We cannot live in a community.
Thank you, sir. Sir, next question is by Shampayon Chakraborty. And his question is, okay, sir, thank you for this enriching session. Many of indigenous communities have certain relation with hunting events. There are several myths and legends presented in their hunting songs and orality. Sir, can a hunting process become a claim for their history?
This is hunting to me, because after my association, very long association with the different indigenous communities of Odisha and other places. Again, I will refer to the anthropologist, and that is the way we differ from their work. Our work differ from their work. The reason is, what they write, they live with that. As if they don't get food, they go for hunting, and that becomes their food, which is not true. Because what happens? A proper procedure is followed. A month is selected for that. A particular month is selected for that. Rituals are followed before going for hunting. Even during hunting, some norms are followed. Rituals are followed. Who will accompany, who will not accompany. The complete process is followed. And finally, they may get or may not get anything. So their living with hunting is not correct. It is a kind of festival for them. It is a game for them. So hunting is a festival. Until may be banned for some other reason, but as a festival, it is there. And how it is a festival, it is a game, and therefore hunting is an institution for them. And there is a particular month is fixed, not that any time people go for hunting. And they go, they follow some rituals. If the prey comes under the hand of a particular person, he is rewarded. If the person is responsible for living it, then he is also ridiculed. So this is the whole process is a performance, and that is associated with the festival. So in this way we have to see. Therefore, my point is, if we start collecting information from the secondary sources, we will face number of problems. But if we go to field and collect information, we'll watch many things which perhaps we are not thinking to get. We are not expecting, but many things will come automatically. So this is my advice for that. So we should not think much on that it's going to take you in a different direction. But we have to understand what hunting is in a particular society. It's not individual hunter. Another thing, the community goes for hunting. Even 30, 40 people, they go together. So it is not individual hunter. So hunting it's a different process there in any indigenous societies.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Sir, next question is by Urvashi Kuad, and
Okay.
her question is, the term indigenous means native. Would it be just or satisfactory to refer to folk culture of every state as merely indigenous culture of the country when speaking globally? Would not it
No.
become difficult to make specific reference while speaking of it?
No, we cannot. This is, just like we say who is folk, who is not. When I in the beginning, I said I am using the word indigenous in place of tribe, and this is accepted. And it was also accepted not to use tribe. The reason is it conveys some other things. But we are helpless. We are in a position, helpless position, that we have no other way. We have to accept it because we have a tribal ministry, and we love to be recognized at some points for certain region. But when it is academic discourse, why should we accept the term that has been designed to serve a political purpose or administrative purpose? Why should not we accept our purpose? And Professor Raja Pradhan's question also goes with that. To say equivalent word for indigenous, I think it is there in all the regional languages, but any term is incomplete in itself to communicate, to convey the sense. And the way to the other questions, again going back, the way we cannot say if we accept tribe, we cannot say all the tribes are the primitive tribes. The way the word primitive is not acceptable while referring to all communities, ethnic communities. The same way, indigenous will not be acceptable to accept referring to all folk communities or all the folk group. So yes, very good thing. I'll try to explore. Even the Odia word for indigenous, I'm not very happy. Adi Manav or Adima Jati, the Odia term, but I'm not happy with that term. Rather, Adivasi is a better term than indigenous and tribal. So if we accept, let us accept Adivasi, and Adivasi can be used in English as well. Professor Pradhani, this is my answer to you because I could read what do you think could be proper Indian equivalent word. So let us accept Adivasi, no problem, until we get a proper word.
Thank you, sir. I don't think there are much question. So if anybody has anything to add, just can unmute your mic and share your views. So, sir, I do not think any more question is there. So we are about to complete this session. Thank you, sir. And I would like to request our student Shonali to give formal vote of thanks. Shonali.
Before that, let me
yes,
thank all these friends who listened to me and also who initiated the discussion, joined in the discussion, and my good wishes and special thanks to Dr. Pramanik who gave me this opportunity to interact with everybody.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Shonali, are you here? I think she has some internet problem. Okay, so thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation and delivering such a talk. It is actually it will lead us to new direction of study, and hopefully we will get in next academic endeavor and several academic engagements in our department. And when pandemic will be over, once again we will get you in the department in physical presence. I hope. And I thank all the participants, present here today from different parts of country, and listen to Professor Patnaik. And I thank everyone present here, and special thank to Sir Professor Patnaik, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.